My name is Faye Yeager, and I'm 33. One October night, I was standing in my kitchen in Colorado, waiting for a kettle to boil, when the phone I'd kept quiet for 6 years began to light up and would not stop. For 6 years, my family never called me. Not on my birthday, not once. Then, in a single hour, my sister and my mother and people I hadn't spoken to since I was 27 called me 89 times. They didn't call when I was drowning. They called when I could swim. But the calls weren't the strange part. The strange part was what my sister found the hour before they started, and what I did after. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge. This is where we tell the quiet stories, the ones about people who walked away, drew a line, and got tested years later. If a story ever kept you up thinking about your own family, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Because to know why one search on Google made my whole family go silent, you have to know what I'd become while they weren't looking. Here is what I was doing that October, before any phone rang. I was sitting on the edge of a stranger's bed at 2 in the afternoon, holding a dying man's hand so he wouldn't be alone when his breathing changed. I'm a hospice nurse. I work the hard hours, the last ones, the ones most people never see. That afternoon, his daughter stood in the doorway, terrified, and I showed her how to wet his lips with a small sponge so she'd have something to do with her hands. That's most of the job, honestly. Giving people something to do with their hands. Behind me, in the corner, stood Jenna, 24, my student that season. She watched me the way I once wished someone would watch me, like I knew something worth learning. I did know something. I knew how to make a bad ending gentler. A month before that October, the state had given me an award for a program I built. Home hospice for the rural counties where people used to die 2 hours from the nearest nurse. There was a photo of me in a newspaper. A little recognition, late in coming. At home, there was Adam, and a quiet apartment, and a life I had built board by board with my own 2 hands. I had made myself, in 6 years, into the person families lean on when the worst thing is happening. I was good at it. I let strangers lean their whole weight on me, and I never once buckled. I just never let it be my own family again. That was the one rule I thought I'd earned the right to keep. That October, someone was about to test it. 6 years is a long time to hear nothing. When you go no contact, people imagine a fight, a slammed door, a scene. Mine wasn't like that. Mine was silence, and silence is worse, because it has no edges you can push against. I sent no cards. They sent none back. My birthday came and went, 6 times, and my phone stayed dark. I told myself I didn't check it. I checked it. The one that still catches in my throat is different, though. 2 years ago, I lost a pregnancy. My first. I was 10 weeks along, and then I wasn't. And I was standing in a hospital bathroom that wasn't even mine to be a patient in, and I did a stupid, soft thing. I texted my mother. 1 line, just that I'd lost the baby and I didn't know why I was telling her. She read it. The little word under the message told me she read it. She never wrote back. Not that day, not that month, not ever. That's when I finally understood the silence wasn't an accident. It was the message. It said, "You left, so you don't get to be one of us when it hurts." After that, I stopped hoping. I want you to hear that clearly, because it matters for what comes later. By that October, I was not a woman waiting by the phone for her family to love her. I was done. I had grieved them like you grieve the living, which is the loneliest grief there is. And that is exactly the state I was in when the screen lit up. So you can imagine how little I wanted to answer. To understand why I left, you'd have to sit at our kitchen table when I was a kid. My father, Wade, was an electrician, hands like tool leather, a man who believed feelings were a luxury for people who hadn't worked a real day. My mother, Marlene, kept the peace by keeping score. And me, I was the one who could handle things. That was my label. Not the pretty one, not the smart one, the one who could handle it. I paid the light bill at 16 with money from bagging groceries because the disconnection notice came and nobody else would look at it. At 19, I drove my father to a clinic to dry out and sat in the parking lot for 6 hours because he didn't want to go in alone, but didn't want me inside either. When the transmission died, I found the money. When Grandma fell, I made the calls. My sister Colleen, 3 years older, got to just be a person in that house. She was allowed to be tired, to be moody, to need things. I was the one things were needed from. And here's the part that took me years of therapy to say out loud without flinching. I liked it. I was proud of being the one who could handle it, because being useful was the only currency that ever bought me a kind word in that house. Love came with a job description, and the job was mine. Nobody ever sat me down and said it. They didn't have to. I learned it the way you learn a language, before you even know it's a language. Which is why, when I finally couldn't do the job anymore, it felt less like leaving a family and more like quitting a position no one would let me resign from. The thing that finally broke it was a loan. 6 years ago, my father lost his union job when the shop closed, and the family plan, arrived at without me in the room, was that I would co-sign a large loan against the house and defer my nursing program a year to move home and manage things. Manage. Always that word. I was 27. I had clawed my way into that program off 2 jobs and a scholarship, and it was the first thing in my life that was only mine. I said no. I said it quietly, in that same kitchen, and I remember the exact temperature of the silence that followed. My mother cried. My father didn't look at me, and Colleen said the thing that told me everything. After everything this family did for you. As if I'd been a charity case, and not the one holding the roof up since 16. Within a week, the story had set like concrete. Faye is selfish. Faye thinks she's better than us. Faye abandoned her dying someday parents to go play nurse. I didn't fight the story. That's the part people don't understand. I could have argued, sent long messages, tried to make them see me. I'd tried that my whole life. Instead, I did the one thing that had never been allowed. I left, and I did it without drama, and I stayed gone. No door slammed. I just stopped answering, moved 1,000 miles away, and let the silence they'd taught me work in both directions for once. That quiet was what made them furious, more than any shouting could have, because a screaming daughter is still yours. A calm one who simply walks out has decided you're not worth the fight. I decided that at 27. It took me until this October to find out if I still believed it. So, back to the kitchen, the kettle, that October night. The first thing that came was not a call. It was a text. From a number I had blocked years ago and, in some weak-hearted week, unblocked and never blocked again. Colleen. My sister. I knew the number the way you know an old scar. There was no hi. No. It's been a while. No. How are you? There was a link. Just a link. Blue and cold. Sitting there under her name like a summons. I didn't open it. I want credit for that, at least. I looked at that link for a while before I touched it. And while I was looking, something odd happened. I still had one foot in the old world. I'd never left the family group chat. I'd muted it and hidden it years ago, but I was still in it, a ghost in the corner. That night, out of some instinct, I opened it. It was going off. Dozens of messages stacked up in the last 20 minutes. My mother and my aunts and Colleen, typing over each other, the little dots blinking. I couldn't see what they were saying. They'd started a new thread I wasn't on, but I could see the old one, alive, churning. And then, as I watched, it stopped. All at once, the dots vanished. The churn went still. A chat that had been boiling for 20 minutes went dead silent, mid-sentence, like a room where someone had just walked in and said something that made everyone shut their mouths. I sat there in my quiet kitchen, kettle screaming now, staring at that sudden stillness, and I felt the first cold finger of dread. Something had happened, something big enough to silence a family that never stopped talking, and the only clue I had was one blue link I hadn't opened yet. Adam came into the kitchen because I'd let the kettle scream. He's a calm man, my Adam. He took it off the burner without a word and looked at me looking at my phone, and he said, "Who is it?" I said, "My sister." He knows what that means, or means for me, so he didn't say anything cheerful. He just leaned against the counter and waited. And in that pause, I looked around my own kitchen like I was seeing it from a distance. The chipped blue mug that was mine, only mine. The calendar with my shifts on it. The window with the mountain behind it. 6 years it took me to build a life this quiet. 6 years to get to a place where the phone was a tool and not a threat. Where nobody could reach into my chest and pull. I had a strange, clear thought, standing there. Whatever was on the other end of that link, it had weight. And if I picked it up, it would be heavy, and it would try to become mine to carry. That's how it always worked. Their emergencies had a gravity that bent me toward them. I'd spent 6 years learning to stand outside that pull. And I actually knew, the way you know a storm is coming from the pressure, that opening the link was stepping back inside the range of it. Adam said gently, "You don't have to look." He was right. I could have deleted it, blocked her again, poured the tea, gone to bed, kept the life I'd built intact and untouched. That was the smart move. That was the move the last 6 years had trained me to make. I put the phone face down on the counter. I even took a breath. I'd spent 6 years learning not to pick up. I lasted about 9 minutes. I opened it. Of course I opened it. The link went to a newspaper website, a regional paper back home, and the page that loaded was an article about a hospice program in rural Colorado, and the woman in the photo, in scrubs, smiling that tired professional smile, was me. My name in the headline, my award, my face, staring back at me from my sister's text message. She hadn't written a single word to go with it. She didn't need to. I understood the whole thing in one breath. Colleen hadn't gone looking for me because she missed me. She hadn't typed my name into a search bar out of love, wondering how her little sister was, hoping I was okay. She'd been looking for something, and she'd found me. And what she'd found was not a sister. It was a resource, a hospice nurse, an award winner, a woman with a steady job and, the article helpfully mentioned, a role-building end-of-life care programs. Whatever was happening back in that house, they had a problem, and they'd just discovered that the daughter they'd erased was, conveniently, the exact solution to it. That's why the group chat went silent. For 6 years, they'd told each other a story about me. Selfish, failed, cold Faye who ran off to play nurse, and that article had just detonated the story. You cannot call a woman a failure while looking at her award. So they went quiet, all of them at once, to rewrite me in real time from villain into asset. I set the phone down. It was still warm in my hand. And then, right there on the counter, face up now, it began to ring. Not a text this time, a call. Then, before I could even reach for it, a second one, stacking behind the first. I did not answer. I stood in my kitchen and I let it ring, and I watched the little counter on the screen climb. My mother. An unknown local number. My Aunt Deb. Another unknown. Colleen again. Someone labeled only as a town exchange I recognized from childhood. They came in waves. A call ending and another beginning before the screen could even settle. Voicemails stacking up like planes I refused to let land. Adam stood beside me and neither of us spoke, because there was something genuinely frightening about it. The sheer volume. A whole town's worth of people suddenly needing to reach the woman they hadn't needed in 6 years. The counter passed a dozen, past 30, past 50. Adam finally said low, "Faye, what is going on?" And I said, "I don't know yet," because I truly didn't. Nobody had told me anything. That's the part that still amazes me, looking back. 89 times my phone rang in that 1 hour, my family reaching for me with both hands across 6 years of silence, and not one of them, not in a single voicemail, led with why. Not one said, "We're so sorry. We've missed you. Here is what's wrong." The calls were not an apology arriving late. They were a demand arriving early. I could feel it in the rhythm of them, insistent, entitled. The way you pound on a door you're sure should open for you. Somewhere in the stack was the actual emergency. the real thing that had set all this in motion, and I would have to dig for it like it was my job to earn the explanation. 89 calls, and not one of them was, "I'm sorry." I finally turned the ringer off, not because I'd decided anything, but because I couldn't think with the phone screaming that the whole family loved me now that I was useful. In the sudden quiet, one voicemail notification sat on top of the pile, from my mother. That one I would listen to. I played my mother's voicemail on speaker, standing very still, the way you brace before a cold shower. Her voice came out older than I remembered, wet at the edges. She said my name twice, like a woman testing whether a bridge would hold. Then she got to it. My father had cancer, pancreatic. They'd found it late, the way it's almost always found late, and there was no fixing it, only counting it, and the counting was already down to weeks. Maybe a few. That landed in me somewhere deep and old, and I had to put a hand on the counter. But it was the next part that told me exactly where I stood, 6 years and one diagnosis later. My mother did not say, "We want you home." She did not say, "Your father is asking for you," or "We were wrong," or "Please." What she said, in a voice sliding from grief into something more practical, was this: "You're a hospice nurse now, honey. You know what to do. You need to come home and handle this." Handle it. There it was. The oldest word in my whole life, the one I'd driven 2 states and 6 years to escape, waiting for me in my mother's mouth like it had never left. They didn't want their daughter back. They'd found a nurse, a free one, who happened to share their last name, who happened to owe them, or so the story went. My father was dying, which was real and terrible and true. And in the same breath, my family had looked at that dying and thought, "Faye can manage this for us." I set the phone down. Adam was watching my face. "What do they want?" he asked. I said, "They want me to work my father's death for free." And the awful thing was, some part of me already wanted to go. When the phone rang again and it was Colleen, I made my first mistake. I answered. I don't fully know why. Maybe because she was the one who'd found me, the one who'd fired the shot that started all this. Maybe because some 16-year-old still lived in me who wanted her big sister to say she was glad to hear my voice. She didn't. There was no hello. She came out swinging, the way she always had, like the best defense against her own guilt was to get to anger first. "So," she said, "you're alive. Nice of you to pick up. 6 years, Faye, and it takes Dad dying to get you on the phone?" I didn't answer, which made her louder. Behind her voice I could hear things. A suction machine, that wet mechanical rasp I know from 100 bedsides, and the low drone of a hospital bed motor. She was in the room with it already. She'd been in the room with it for weeks. And into my silence she dropped the line I would carry the rest of my life, the sentence that was really the whole argument between us, the whole war between 2 ways of seeing a family. "Family," she said, "isn't something you get to quit." She meant it like a fact, like gravity, like I'd broken a law of nature by leaving, and now nature was collecting. And here's what I understood, standing in my quiet kitchen with my sister's exhaustion crackling down the line. This was not a reconciliation. Nobody on that end of the phone had spent this month missing me. They'd spent it drowning, and then they'd found a life raft with my face on it. I said carefully, "I need to think." Colleen laughed, short and bitter. "Think," she said. "Right. You do that. He doesn't have time for you to think." And she hung up on me. That night I said no, not to her. She'd hung up, but to the pull. I said it to